Okay, we're going to go ahead and begin the meeting. This is the San Diego Commission on Police Practices Ad Hoc Transition Planning Committee. This is Friday, May the 21st at 3 o'clock. And let me turn on my participants list and chat. Okay, so I will call the roll from the participants list. I'm Doug Case and I am the chair. We have present committee members Diana Dent and Nancy Vaughn. And where did Patrick go? Oh,
there he is.
He's here. Oh, there he is. He's at the bottom of my list. I had to scroll down. I was trying to, he disappeared from my list. And Pat Anderson. We have our San Diegans for Justice liaison, Kate Yavendetti. We have Chris Cameron, who is our outside counsel. And we have our executive director, Charmaine Mosley.
And I just admitted Joe.
Oh, good. And so we have joining us Joe Craver. So hi, Joe. And welcome back to the committee. And we need to get it a note taker. Nancy did it last week. Chris did it the week before. So it's either Patrick or Diana.
Patrick has to leave the meeting early, so I'm probably not the best choice. I'm
okay,
sorry, Diana.
That's okay. So Diana, do you mind doing it? Okay.
Let me know if you want me to send you the transcription.
That would be great.
Yes, that helps.
I'm going to be in a convention all this weekend, so if you could send that to me, I would really appreciate it. But I'm taking notes anyway.
Okay, and Nancy sent me her notes. They were in bullet format, and I will send them out to everybody. Did we get any public comment for this meeting?
No public comment received.
Okay, and so I'll go ahead and give the update. So the budget process, the mayor released his revised budget on, I think, Monday. And it appears that everything that we asked for in our revision is included in the budget. I haven't looked at the numbers to confirm that yet, but the description indicated that, the description of the items that were added to our budget matched what we had asked to be added to the budget, including the increases of the salary of the executive director and the general counsel. And so I'm assuming that everything is as we requested. And then the city council had their hearing. It was just an informational hearing on the revised budget yesterday. And the only person who asked a question about our budget was Raul Campillo. And he had a question regarding the number of full-time employees that were in the budget, because it had changed less than one person, and that's because we had changed the starting dates. And then in terms of staffing, maybe Charmaine can fill us in on where we are on the filling of the executive assistant and administrative aide positions.
Sure. So we held interviews this past week. On the panel was myself and Executive Director Gerald Brown from CAB, and our chair Brandon Hilpert. We interviewed 4 candidates, and we're still in the process of making a decision as to who will be moving forward. And the next step is going to be to start going over the applications for the admin aide position. So I'll start looking over that this past week, this weekend coming up.
Okay, and do you know when the interviews are going to be for that position?
Hopefully next week, sometime next week or early the following week.
Okay. And we don't have any community volunteers yet to serve on that. I see Kate shaking her head no.
No, and in fact, Doug, I think something that emerged last week is that community members were essentially backing what Nancy had suggested at our last meeting, which is that some staffing to handle the day-to-day, given the avalanche of work that Charmaine is facing, is absolutely appropriate. But community members were really saying that that the hiring of other permanent positions should wait for the permanent executive director appointment, which is what Nancy had argued last week. And I was one of the people who pushed back against that and said, we need
actually
staff.
we have that on the agenda.
Oh, we do. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Doug.
Okay, and yeah, so we're going to be discussing that issue, and okay. But if I don't know if Patrick has any contacts to have somebody assist with the
So
administrative aid.
I've reached out to people and they just don't have availability to step in to do these interviews. I've asked a number of people, and I think it's a similar thing to what Kate is facing, that finding the time to do that right now, for us, it's the end of the academic year. And so right. A lot of the people that I would ask are.
And that's what we're running up against with the Youth Council at Mid-City Can, is the kids are still in school, they're looking at finals.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence, because I think it's important that we try to have a community person in all of the
so I wanted to also note that all of the memos were drafted last weekend and sent over to the personnel department to create those exempted positions, which is the performance analyst, the auditor, as well as the supervising investigator and the general counsel.
Yeah, so policy audit, performance auditor and policy analyst.
Oh.
Yeah, and so those four positions, and so Charmaine and I have had a couple of meetings with personnel to make sure that those are worded correctly, so that when it goes before civil service on June the 6th, it'll be smooth sailing. And I think we'll get a heads up if there's any concerns. The only one which I think there may be some pushback from the MEA on is the investigator positions, but we'll find out. The implementation ordinance, we're still waiting to hear back from Chloe whether that will be available to us before Memorial Day, which would be before our next meeting. Originally, we were told that a draft would be available before Memorial Day, but at the time District 4 told us that, I think the plan was to present it at the regular PSNLN meeting on the second week in June. Now we know there's going to be a special meeting June 24th to consider the implementation ordinance. And so I don't know whether or not they're still going to have a draft to us next week or not. And so stay tuned. Really nothing new on office space since last week. And then in terms of the standing rules, I think as most of you know, the Rules Committee met yesterday, and we had quite a bit of written public comment. We had 170 some prior to the meeting. I'm not sure if we got any after the 8 o'clock in the morning yesterday. And then we had about 8 people or so who spoke at the meeting. All of them were in opposition to allowing the police in to participate in the deliberations, and a motion to allow that failed. But there was discussion of at the meeting of perhaps if there is items that in the deliberations that the commission wants to share with the department, that could be put in a memo. Another comment that Brandon made afterwards was that there's no reason why we can't, when they come back in the room and we tell them what the vote was, if there was any major issues we wanted to make them aware of, we can make them aware of it verbally at that time. And something else that occurred to me that I didn't mention yesterday is that the team issues and concerns, which really often focus on the things we want the police department to hear, is actually discussed after the vote on the findings. And so the department already hears things. Anyway, so there'll be a report on the rules at the Rules Committee report at the open meeting, but there won't be any motion because there was no motion that passed. The other thing that we discussed was streamlining our reports, and there was a consensus that it was a good idea. And what we decided to do was to do it on a trial basis and make our reports somewhat similar to audit reports, but perhaps a little bit more detail, and also kind of depending upon the complexity of the case, to leave it to the discretion of the team to how much detail to put into the report. And three of us, and remind me, Sharon, I know it was me, Nancy, and who was the other person?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Three of us volunteered to write up, Kevin, okay. And so we're going to write up a streamlined report, for lack of a better word, of our next cases, and then the commission is going to look at those and give us feedback as to whether that's a good format or not. And so if it is, then maybe we will write up some guidelines and put them into our standing rules.
Can I ask for clarification of something?
Sure.
So the previous issue about internal affairs being present during deliberations and vote, I heard you say that because there was not a motion that passed the Rules Committee, this would not be taken back to the full commission. Is that, so there won't be another vote by the full commission on this?
Right. Well, I guess theoretically somebody could make a motion again, but the recommendation of the Rules Committee is that we do not change our procedures.
Well,
so procedurally,
that's a procedural question. I think if there's no notice, can somebody just bring up a motion on such an important topic? Isn't that a Brown Act issue?
It has to be in the agenda.
It's on the agenda.
So it's on the agenda?
It's on the agenda. But so I guess somebody could. Maybe Chris can weigh in since we have our attorney here. The issue, Chris, is that the Rules Committee considered the issue, and the issue was, as you may know, since we became a commission, the police department is no longer present during our deliberations and the vote. We put them in our virtual meetings. We put them in a waiting room, and then we bring them back and let them know what the answer to the vote was. There were several commissioners who wanted to go back to the old way of doing it. And the department indicated they preferred that too, because they liked hearing what the discussion was. We took that to the Rules Committee, and that's what we discussed yesterday. And a motion was made to essentially go back to the old way, and that motion failed. And so we have on our agenda the report of the Rules Committee, and the report's going to be that the Rules Committee defeated a motion to go back to the old way of doing it. And the question that Patrick or Kate raised, I forget which one, is, I guess it was Kate, is can somebody make the motion that was defeated at the Rules Committee, since it's listed on the meeting, or does that have to be at a separate meeting?
So when you say it's listed on the agenda, I'm assuming you mean the CPP agenda, not the Rules Committee agenda.
Yeah, the CPP agenda, and I don't have it in front of me.
It's on the CPP agenda under the Rules Committee as a report item. It's not listed as a discussion action item.
Yeah, so you'd probably have to do a two-step process where somebody recommended that matter be brought as an action item or a discussion item to your next meeting, and then you'd re-agendize it so that you could have that conversation again.
Okay. Yeah, and so I don't have the agenda in front of me, but Charmaine wrote it. Yeah, it's not listed as a action item.
Yeah, but after committee chair reports, I have it in parentheses on discussion action /action, but that's incorrect.
So we need a definitive answer on this, because I need to go back to our community partners and let them know if there's a chance that this vote could happen, because we will have a similar.
It's not listed under new business, and it's not listed under unfinished business as a discussion action item. So the commission cannot act on it.
And I
we'll have to put it on the agenda under unfinished business or new business.
But that would be at a subsequent meeting.
Yes.
So the most that could happen at this CPP meeting would be that somebody comes up and says, I think the whole committee or commission needs to talk about this, and okay, let's put it on our next agenda. And then your folks would know that at the next meeting, it's going to be discussed and could be voted, and an action could be voted on.
Yes, correct.
And that is absolutely the final answer. I just want to make sure there's no chance that a vote could be taken on this.
I have a question.
Well, let Patrick get an answer to his question first.
Okay.
So that would be my understanding. It's going to depend on the executive director and the chair kind of like maybe needing to explain to people who try to jump in and say, hey, I want to do this, that no, we can't do it that way. We would need to agendize it and discuss it in another meeting.
Yeah, it's not really clear on this agenda item, so I wouldn't feel comfortable putting it up for a vote or even a discussion at this time. It would have to go on a following agenda.
Okay. And I mean, Patrick, I know San Diegans for Justice are submitting public comment anyway, because they texted me today.
Doug.
Okay, now Nancy.
Our procedures, our bylaws say that the committees can't make decisions, but they bring their their items for discussion and action to the full commission. I don't see any difference. Why does this have to be listed as new business or old business or something? If it comes out as a report from a committee, it's fair game. And especially if the committee, I don't know what it says on the agenda, but if the committee says discussion and action, that's the way our committees work, is we bring things to the board and they get handled as part of the committee report. What am I missing?
It sounds to me like a proposal was brought up at the committee level that didn't garner enough votes for there to be a recommendation for a change. And so what's coming back to your commission is a report that the matter was discussed at the committee, but that no action was recommended.
What it says under the rules committee item, it says streamlining case reports, and it has in parentheses file. So that's not giving the public any information as to what is going to happen with this agenda item. And when we talk about,
now we're talking about the other item. We're talking about the police presence during deliberations.
The second one. Okay.
Okay.
How does that one read?
And where on the agenda does it say discussion action?
It says committee chair reports in parentheses discussion action, which should not be there.
Okay. So right do we always put every item that's to be voted on under new business or unfinished business?
Yes, like it says approval of CPP proposed transition timeline, approval of.
But that's not something coming from a committee. When the committee reports out something, it seems to me that we have always entertained motions for support or whatever.
It would say action item next to that item in parentheses, and it will have more information in there. This was not going to be an action item. This was going to be just a report out from Doug as to what happened at yesterday's meeting.
Without allowing further action. Okay, all right.
Chris, there's one correction to your understanding of this, though. At our previous open meeting, there was discussion of this item, and there was deeply divided opinion. And so it was sent to the Rules Committee for discussion. So there was this previous step at an open meeting where this was discussed.
Right. So I don't have the agenda right in front of me, but just based on Charmaine's description, I have some concerns that even though there's that past, and you're probably right that, if you went back and you looked at the various agendas, you could foresee it coming forward for more discussion. But the problem is that under the Brown Act, it really wants a person to be able to pick up just Oopsie, Sheila. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. I was going to say that, you know, it really wants a person in the public to be able to pick up just that one agenda and know for sure this is an item that could be acted on, or this isn't an item that could be acted on. And if it's going to be acted on, we need to tell the public, well, what's that action? It's keeping them in, or it's keeping them out, or it's.
Well, and you'll note that in the items, even though where it has discussion action for the items that we're going to be voting on, Charmaine puts in parentheses action item, potential action item. And so I think to be in compliance with the Brown Act, we are best to say we can't vote on it unless it's specifically designated as an action item. And it might be good to for Charmaine to brief Brandon on this discussion before the meeting starts, in case so he can announce that in case anybody's interested in making a motion to revisit the issue.
Okay.
Okay.
So as long as we're definitive about this, I want to be able to go back to our community partners and say there will not be a vote taken on this. So if you were planning, if there were folks planning to show up to speak because action was being taken on this, the action's not going to be, there's not a chance that it'll be taken. But I don't want to do that if there's any chance at all that it could come up.
Well, I think we just got our advice from our council, and we generally follow our council when it comes to the Brown Act. And so, Charmaine, if you can make that known. And like I said, I know that they're planning on making public comment anyway.
Right. We certainly can't stop them. I just want to just sort of in the interest of full disclosure, I don't know when your meeting is. Is it what day is it next week?
Tuesday. Oh,
Tuesday. Never mind. I was going to say, you can always amend your agenda if you want to have that be an action item, but I think we're within the 72 hours.
Yeah. Well, and nobody has indicated an intent to make that motion.
And I don't know what action you would list, because you don't have a proposal that's been vetted or that's been proposed by your rules committee. So you don't really have an action to tell them is the target action right at the moment. Right. So this would let anybody who brought it up next week be able to say, I want the whole commission to, decide whether or not the policemen are in or the policemen are out.
Okay.
I think there was a default recommendation from the rules committee that we continue the way that we are. That is to say, the police are there except during our deliberations and voting.
Yeah, but it doesn't require a motion to do what you're already doing.
No, I understand. But I mean, there is a position that's being reported out of the rules committee.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, so moving on to unfinished business, was the item held over from last week was the procedure for dealing with disagreements over findings, not discipline, but findings between the CPP and SDPD. And the question was, is there any way we can come up with a process to have a mediation or even a binding arbitration to settle or to resolve such disagreements? And if so, what might that consist of? And so we talked about several different possibilities, and the issue was, can we do that within the confines of Measure G and existing law, et cetera? And so let me ask Chris to weigh in, because I know she's been researching this issue for us.
Thanks, and I appreciate the additional time. We took a careful look at this, and I think that it depends on what you're talking about, as we kind of discussed last week. If you want to informally, be conferring with IA where you anticipate that you're coming to a different decision, I think you can do that in the context of, your investigation before you would bring something to the commission for a full decision. When you're talking about something like arbitration, where you're going to put somebody in charge of saying who was right and who was, or what the final determination is going to be on, for example, a finding of misconduct, we think that's more problematic. We don't think that as the commission unilaterally within, how Measure B was written, that you have the ability to sort of assign yourself that, the ability to have that additional authority. It's potentially a delegation of the authority granted under Measure B, because as the commission, you are to come to a determination as to wrongdoing or, officer misconduct. And for you to delegate that decision to somebody else could be problematic. Now, with all of that said, the council also has the ability to assign additional or to approve procedures and rules and other duties to you. And potentially you could let the council know if you're interested in having something like that worked in. They would have to work with the city attorney to determine whether they agreed that that was something that was even within the purview of Measure B to be able to do. And then maybe the council could do that. But I don't think that you have that authority on your own.
Okay, it would have to be, in the implementation ordinance anyway. And so we were going to recommend that for the implementation ordinance, but our question was, is that even possible?
So, like I said, I think it's going to come down to the facts on this. So, if you gave them one scenario where you basically were proposing that, an arbitrator decide whether there was or wasn't misconduct, let's say IA comes to the conclusion there wasn't, and the commission comes to the conclusion that there was, there may not be the ability to delegate that duty on your part to make that finding to somebody else like an arbitrator. But that would be something that I don't want to speak for the city attorney, because they're going to also look at the charter. If the council comes to them and says, hey, we do want to be able to try to do this, the city attorney is going to weigh in, and I don't want to speak for them.
Would it make any difference if we propose a mediation process as opposed to an arbitration process?
And I think what it's going to come down to is mediation to what end? What is the goal of the mediation? Is it to identify who was correct in terms of that? What I heard when we were discussing it last time was that there was a desire on the part of the community to have somebody come down and say, IA was right or the commission was right. And then that was a desire of the community. And if that is the goal, I have a hard time fitting that into just the plain text of Measure B. And like I said, the only difference would be whether council, in their authority to give you different duties and responsibilities or procedures, whether they could do that. But I don't see that as being something that the commission on its own could determine.
We weren't. Our goal from the beginning was to make a recommendation regarding the implementation ordinance.
Right.
So,
and I think you're going to have to give the city some particulars on what you want the end goal of that to be. Because that's kind of going to drive the issue for them as they look also at the sort of the language of the now charter itself.
Okay. And so it's possible that it could be done under the clause that gives them the ability to assign additional duties to the
additional duties or procedures or rules for how you're going to conduct your work. I think that it will be challenging for them to come to a conclusion that that the commission can essentially delegate its responsibility to make a finding to another arbiter. Moreover, in Measure B, for purposes of misconduct, it says that the appeal is going to go to the Civil Service Commission.
Right.
And so that's another challenge, because if that is where the measure says the appeal goes, then to say that an appeal or a determination basically on that same question goes someplace else could be in conflict.
And I don't have the measure in front of me, but does that actually I do, but does it apply to just discipline, or does it also apply to findings? And I know that
we think the conclusion is the same as to findings and as to misconduct determinations, but for different reasons. And on discipline, the problem is that duty is assigned to the police chief. Even the commission doesn't have the authority to determine, discipline.
Okay.
You can only make a recommendation to the city police chief.
Yeah. But we would not be delegating our responsibility to come up with a finding, because we would still have our finding, just like IA had their finding. The issue was we would ask that there be a neutral party that resolves the conflict.
Yeah, and I think that the challenge there is that the authority of the commission ends essentially with your determination. You make a determination about wrongdoing. You may make a finding about whether you agreed with discipline or not. But after that, it's a recommendatory role where you make that information available to the police chief.
Okay. Could the council enact a separate ordinance that deals with this issue instead of putting it into the implementation measure?
Well, I mean, I think that's where additional duties, rules, and procedures as assigned by the council becomes relevant. Now they're going to still have to not be directly in conflict with their own charter, so they're going to have to find a way to, put this process somewhere, after the whole portion of what the commission does is over, or something else. And also I think you have to think about if you're going to look for something like this and you're going to make your finding, that is the commission's finding on wrongdoing before this occurs, then you're going to have to accommodate that officer's right to appeal to the Civil Service Commission. I don't know if that happens before or after.
Yeah, well, that was part of the thing we weren't sure, is that if there's an appeal, would it be after the arbitration or before the arbitration?
I think the problem is that the arbitration begins to look a lot like essentially another, like a substitute for the appeal right, which is right now assigned to the Civil Service Commission. And you're going to have the danger of inconsistent outcomes from these two different bodies. Right now, we know the charter says the Civil Service Commission.
Could we communicate that we would like to have a process implemented that is similar to our current process, which is that disagreements are resolved by the mayor's office to continue, but that it be done by a neutral party and not the mayor's office, and let the city attorney figure out whether that could be done and how it could be done.
I'm not sure that I understand what.
Well, see, because essentially what we're trying to do is, right, currently under the, well, not currently, but under the, and actually it's a little bit fuzzy as to whether we can still do it under the interim standard operating procedures, because we said we could refer things to the mayor. We did, but the under the old CRB, if there was a disagreement between internal affairs and the CRB that they couldn't resolve, they could refer the case to the mayor, and the mayor basically served as an arbitrator.
Yeah, and we know that can't happen because that there's an explicit independence of the commission from the mayor's office.
Right, and so yeah, so exactly, and so we wanted to try to replicate the process without involving the mayor's office, which is why we came up with the idea of having some type of neutral panel, perhaps consisting of retired judges or. I
think the challenge in all, in this is, it kind of sounds like you're looking for somebody else to do what I think we read as being assigned to the commission under Measure B.
Well, we're still going to have our finding. We would just like to have, in other words, if, for example, we find that the officer's behavior was sustained in violation of the policy and the department found that it was exonerated, rather than, and the department, well, in that case, under the existing ordinance, presumably, the default position is that the department would prevail because they're the ones that decide whether or not the findings are sustained and impose discipline. They essentially, the commission is a recommending body, and the department is free to accept or not accept the recommendations of the commission. So we were trying to find a way, if there's a way to find a arbitrator of differences rather than simply leaving it to the police chief to accept or reject our findings.
Yeah, I think that I'm having a hard time finding a way to make that work within what the measure anticipates, which is that you're going to be an independent commission that makes its own determinations about wrongdoing. You know, and the police chief is still going to implement the discipline piece of it. And then if the officer disagrees with the finding of misconduct, they can appeal it to the Civil Service Commission. I mean, I think, you know, sometimes there are going to be situations where the commission comes to a different conclusion than IA does.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, that's part of the reason why the commission's just to begin with. Others that want to weigh in with a question or
so I have my hand up, and
I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's okay, but I have to leave in about 5 minutes. So is it okay if I jump in?
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you, Chris, for that analysis. And I pulled up the full text of the charter amendment, and I see it's really the two final paragraphs of section 42 that make these fine distinctions. The chief of police must consider the commission's evaluation prior to imposition of discipline, and then any sustained findings may be appealed to the city's Civil Service Commission. So I have 3 questions. I'll try to make them brief.
I'll try to answer quickly so we still have you.
Earlier, I can be a few minutes late. This is important. So earlier in section 41.2, there is text about, it's in the 3rd paragraph. The city council may by ordinance mandate additional duties and authorize additional powers. Right. So first question, is that an opening to the city council saying actually any disagreements will not go to the Civil Service Commission, they would go to a hearing committee of some sort, of some other body? Is that an opening to that or no? Well,
the problem is the next phrase, consistent with this section. So they can authorize additional powers for the commission consistent with this section. And that's where as I say, if you're asking the council, we want you to assign this additional duty or power, then their attorney, the city attorney, is going to look then at the measure and say, okay, but would that be consistent with what else is going on in the measure? And that's where the city attorneys people will come in. And I am concerned that they might have a hard time getting there as well.
Okay, that answers that fully, actually. So thank you. I think part of the differences in the conversation between you and Doug, I think we're conflating findings and discipline in some ways, because when we're talking about appeals, because we believe the commission's findings should be final and should be the primary consideration for what discipline is enacted. That's the sort of imaginary here. And of course, the POBAR laws prevent that direct chain. The supervisor, who's the chief of police, must have primary responsibility and final authority over discipline. Okay, so I wanted to clarify that. The third question is more holistic. So one of the reasons that the idea of mediation and determination is so popular with the community is because they envision an approach to these questions that's based in restorative justice principles. And so the idea that a mediator or facilitator whose primary focus is restorative justice could step in after the findings to say, okay, these were the findings. We're going to hold you accountable to those findings, not in terms of your professional discipline, but in terms of you now being beholden to this process of taking a restorative justice approach to what's happened. Do you see any opening in the language of the charter amendment to that being a part of the process?
So I don't think that notions of restorative justice are inconsistent with what the commission's powers, duties, and responsibilities are. And I think that's probably a good goal for the commission to have in terms of other things the commission works on that are helpful to this overall equation. Because I think you could come up with a program of restorative justice that would not be inconsistent with what's going on with Measure B and your other mandatory and discretionary duties that are articulated in there. And that's going to take a lot of work probably between the community, the commission, identifying the types of cases that are appropriate for restorative justice. There's going to be a whole host of negotiations, I'm sure, that are going to need to go on with the police officers union to figure out, you know, what the boundaries of that look like and what the program looks like. I think that is a different thing than arbitration. Arbitration is kind of like, you're right and you win. And I don't think that's what restorative justice is about. A piece of restorative justice is getting people together and to face each other and see each other as human beings again and understand where each of them are coming from and so on, and doesn't at the end of it have some kind of a punitive component to it.
Yeah, we are proposing that the council, under the provision that Patrick just read, give us the ability to implement a mediation program, which is along the lines of restorative justice. That would be different though, because that's between an officer and a complainant. We were looking at something between us and IA.
I think, it could even be. I mean, restorative processes don't necessarily have to be between individuals and police officers. They could be potentially between the police department and the position of the commission.
That's right.
So, I don't know what that model looks probably a lot different than the restorative justice that is between an individual has an encounter with a police officer and that police officer.
I think the crux of the issue here is that under current California state law, the chief of police is in charge of discipline, and no charter amendment can override state law in that regard. The state law would need to be changed. And so a part of our frustration or the difficulty here is that our findings are final, but that doesn't mean that the commission has any say over what happens because of those findings. And that's where the question of arbitration keeps coming up, because in the mind of people who care about this issue, you've got PD on one side, the commission on the other. They want a final determination of, someone who's going to be able to say, because of this happens. And
I think there's a higher power I think there's kind of a higher set of laws that's standing in the way of that kind of a model right now. So.
Okay, thank you so much. And
I just want to make a comment. I think really the only reality under current law, and I'm not the expert that Chris is, but and we talked about this for a long time within Women Occupy and other groups, is that as long as there's transparency so that the community knows this is the commission's findings, we gave those to the police department, they basically rejected them. And then the police department made their own findings. And then I think it's up to the community if they want to take action. I think it's knowing what has been done and what hasn't been done, what's been accepted and what hasn't been accepted. I think this is my political voice now. I think that's where we are politically, because from what Chris is saying, and it had been my understanding, even that the process is a good idea, and I know that that's something the community wants, but it's not ultimately possible, because I don't think another process can overrule what the chief of police is or is not going to do. And so it may sound nice, but it's kind of another thing that's put there that gives the community hope that we're not going to be able to really get anything from. And I just don't see it happening, frankly. I think, we all think.
Well, then
our next move is to deal with POBAR and to deal with what the law is around that to, you know, and that again is a political issue. But I mean, you can correct me, Chris, but that's kind of my thought.
I think you're right. I think you really are up against a structure that isn't it doesn't have room for that right now. I will tell you that I'm the kind of person who looks out there and says, what can I do to have the most impact within the system I'm given? And then, you know, in another area, maybe I'll try to change the system, but as long as I have it. And it seems to me that you're going to have your most impact on the system of the IA by completing investigations early enough to be able to have that recommendation be there so that the police chief, I mean, he has to consider it in imposing discipline. And I would be working on trying to make sure that my processes are streamlined enough that I can always make that time frame. Because
the problem for the people who came from CRB is that we did have that power. They had agreed to have the mayor adjudicate different findings and make a decision, and they would be commanded to change their finding if the person doing the review, which was always somebody from the mayor's office, but always somebody with a good head on his shoulders, if he found that the position of the CRB was, in his opinion, the correct interpretation of the policies, procedures, and actions of the officer, they would change theirs. And that, coming from that environment, that's what we're trying, I think, Chris, that's what we're trying to find a way to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's because the mayor is the boss of the chief of police.
Right.
And so that's unfortunate. That's.
Oops, we lost you.
Well, you're still muted, Kate. Can you unmute yourself?
Let's see here.
Charmaine, can you try to unmute?
Just keep clicking.
There you go. Now we can hear you.
Thank you. Yeah. I can't remember what I was saying.
Okay.
But I think I was saying that, I mean, that is what you're saying, right, Chris? That now, I mean, we can't go to the mayor.
No.
The mayor had the ability to basically tell the chief of police, this is what we want you to do because I'm your boss, but nobody else can do that.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that was always a kind of a de facto avenue that you had because the laws didn't change. The police chief has always been the, you know, the sole arbiter of discipline over police officers. So, you know, in terms of, I think I may focus my energy on attempting to somehow keep that channel of communication open in some way to the mayor. But, you know, I mean.
Well, and I think that the mayor, I mean, the reality is that the mayor is still,
Right.
still oversees the police chief and can hire and fire the police chief. And so it may be more of a, as Chris said, you know, unwritten using our political influence, assuming that we have a mayor who is inclined to do that. So it sounds like our idea would be good in terms of giving the commission more power in what the community wants, but it seems like it would be difficult to do. Yeah. And then beyond that, we have to get the city attorney to buy into it, and the city attorney is going to be much more conservative.
They're going to probably be even more conservative than I am because they don't like to get sued, and I understand that.
So then why don't we just put that item on the back burner for a while, and then talk about the timeline. And part of the discussion that has come up, and Kate did a good job at the meeting on Saturday of trying to explain to the community that we have a dilemma, but we didn't really resolve the dilemma. And the dilemma is that there are some, including Nancy and Council Member Monica Stepp, who think that there should be no hiring until we have a permanent executive director, which according to our timeline won't be until late in 2022. There also is, and we can't do investigations until we have investigation procedures and until we have investigators. And so obviously under that model, you would have to wait until you had an executive director before you hired and trained the investigators. And so you're basically delaying investigations for a year. And then you have the community also saying we want to begin doing investigations as soon as possible. There also is the 1 year limit on being able to impose discipline. And so there's a sense that we really can't wait for another year before we start doing independent investigations. And so we have, those two things that are in conflict. In terms of, and our hiring timeline is, which also is reflected in our budget, is that we start doing investigations as soon as we have an implementation ordinance and standard operating procedures approved by the city council, which we hope is early next year. To accomplish that, we want to bring on a supervising investigator in September, so that person can develop the procedures and the protocols and can be involved in the hiring of the investigators who would hopefully begin early next year doing investigations. Two issues. Another issue is the community engagement manager, who we have designated as the assistant executive director, because that was a freebie position, if you would, from the city's personnel department, and that each department gets an assistant position, and we could fill that position immediately without having to go through the Civil Service Commission. And we had a desire to get a community engagement manager on board as soon as possible, so that that person can do a lot of the work that Patrick has been doing, but that we can make sure we have community involvement in the creation of the commission's policies and procedures and programs, etc. And so the policy analyst, we also changed our initial budget to ask that person come on board in September. We may want to rethink that one, because it may not be as critical in terms of timing as the investigations are, because the investigations are somewhat time sensitive, whereas the policy analyst isn't quite as time sensitive. And another idea I'd like to throw in the mix before I throw it open for discussion is that which of these positions might we be able to do on a contract basis, kind of like we're doing with our outside counsel, so that maybe we can have some positions that, for example, the supervising investigator, we could have a contract for that. And so it's not a permanent employee position, it's a contracted position. And that would then allow us to begin doing investigations. And then once we have an executive director, the executive director could hire his or her own employee, permanent, or I mean, not permanent, but at least employee supervisor. And it's not unusual, in fact, for investigators to work on a contract basis. In fact, we put into our budget that we would have $200,000 set aside in the next fiscal year to actually have contract investigators if the demand, the workload was such that we needed to do them. So it's possible that we could begin using that model of contracting as soon as possible, and that might resolve some of the concerns that Councilmember Montgomery Steppe does. But could we do the same thing for a community engagement manager? That I don't know. And so anyway, with that, keeping in mind, we're moving forward with a budget that has timeline in place, and we're going to have our timeline approved by the commission next week. Do we want to make any changes in that timeline? And what do people think of the possibility of doing some of the positions as a contract personnel, as opposed to employees. Thoughts?
Well, I have some thoughts.
Go ahead.
I mean, you heard the forum that we had on Saturday. That the community is very upset, not only about the slowness, but now Charmaine says it's a long process for contractors, but the issue that people are having is having interim commissioners, interim executive directors, et cetera, hiring ongoing people. That is something that they really feel is something that the new commissioners should be doing. You know, and that the new commissioners should be also responsible and part of the hiring process for the new executive director. So from our perspective, the real problem with the timeline is not having the new commissioners in place to do all of this, to setting who the people are. So I understand, and it's hard to explain to folks. I mean, but I understand that, you know, about the statute of limitations, about investigators, and about how we can't really get commissioners until we have an ordinance that tells us how we're, you know, interviewing and appointing commissioners, et cetera. So I think a reasonable compromise might really be getting somebody on a contract basis just to do the mandated investigations, so that people would understand that those are not permanent hires, and they're not, and they can and possibly will be replaced when the new commissioners are on board. I mean, the other part of the timeline that's a major issue, of course, is the alleged 6 months for the meet and confer, which will probably take twice that. So I personally like that idea. I mean, I haven't vetted it with other people, but it was something that I was thinking about, just bringing people on just as you do or have done with your independent legal counsel, who I guess are on a contract, an annual year-to-year contract.
Right. Well, and that's exactly why we decided, you know, we decided that it was important for the general counsel to wait until we had the new commission. And actually, we discussed it at a transition committee meeting.
Right, and that's fine. I mean, the fact you already have very competent, basically independent legal counsel, and that's not a major issue. But it's a major issue in the community not to have investigators yet.
Right.
And people are thinking that means that and in a sense it does, that the CPP is not independently investigating even the mandated cases. And I think I tried to say, well, the investigations will still happen, but they're going to happen after the statutes run. So that, of course, isn't any good. So I'm thinking that, you know, and I don't know what the process is about, you know, how long it is to get somebody on as a contract person, but I'm thinking if that's going to be faster and not permanent, that's, I think, something that it's a good idea for the commission to consider. And
we do have, I mean, I know it's a long process, but it's also a process to hire investigators that, you know, to begin with. And so I'm not sure how it would be different than our outside counsel. We would do a request for proposals. We would review the
But I mean, part of the difficulty I see is that it really needs to be a national search, because we don't want somebody, you know, basically from within. And you're unlikely to get somebody on a national search on a short-term contract. But, you know, that's just part of the deal.
Right. And we could do it through, maybe we ought to discuss this with Jason to see what he thinks. Because I know that the many agencies have used contract investigators. And how about if we consult with Jason to see what he thinks might be a good approach to this. But then let me ask the second question. Is there a way to What should we do about the community engagement manager? Because there was, Patrick especially was advocating, he's left, but Patrick was especially advocating we should have that as one of the very first positions. And we made that clear when we met with each of the council members. That's one of our priorities. If we had a selection committee that was made up primarily of community representatives, do you think that that might resolve some of the concerns? Maybe I'll throw that to Kate because Kate is a community representative.
The community is distrustful, frankly, of having the current commissioners do the hiring. I think that's a great idea if that can be done.
Okay. Oh, Nancy has her hand raised. So let me raise her, Nancy.
So I'm wondering if we can do investigations at all without a meet and confer.
No, we can't. No, we have to have a meet and confer, and so they have to approve the implementation ordinance and the standard operating procedures. But the issue is that ideally, and Kate may be right, I'm optimistic that we can get something before the end of the year. But whenever it is, the issue is that once you have the implementation ordinance, then you have to go through a selection process for the commissioners. You have to have the commissioners appointed, then you have to do a national search for the executive director, and then you have to do a search for the supervising investigator and the other investigators. And so you're talking literally a delay of at least a year. So yeah, we cannot begin doing investigations until we have a process approved by the city council, but we're hoping that that'll be sometime early next year, which is what.
Confer.
Well, the meeting confer before that. So the meeting confer is prior to the implementation ordinance. And so the process is the PSNLN will recommend a ordinance to the council. The council will then direct the city's employee relations department to do a meet and confer, and they'll come back after the meet and confer, and then the council will adopt the ordinance based upon the outcome of the meet and confer.
Okay, and my other question, which is maybe Kate and I should meet offline sometime. I'm trying to understand the animosity toward the current CPP members and our executive director. I just don't quite get that. Maybe Kate, you and I can meet someplace and you can explain it to me.
Yeah, contact me next week. These last 2 weeks for me, quite frankly, have been really awful. I mean, I've had personal issues as well as work issues, and it's just been a difficult couple of weeks.
I'm not in any hurry. I've been wondering about this for months. Thank you.
Okay, then how about if I would prefer that we not change our official timeline because that would affect our budget. So I'd rather have the money put into our budget and then us get the positions established. And if we don't hire them, the city has never complained if a department didn't use all their money. So I'd rather have the timeline in place and the money there and so that we're ready to go, even if it's perhaps too optimistic. But I would like to, well, I guess I only heard one person, but my proposal would be that we consult with Jason to see what is reasonable in terms of doing a contract investigators and see whether that's a good alternative, and that we proceed with the community engagement person, but have a majority of the people on the hiring committee be community people. And I don't know whether that would require us to do interviews outside of normal business hours or not. But I think that if we had Patrick, who is our community outreach person, serve on the committee, and we could have Kate serve on the committee if she was willing. I don't want to give you additional work, Kate, but at least maybe ask Kate to find somebody to do it. Charmaine, how large are the committees? Are they usually like 3 or 4 people? Charmaine's on mute.
Sorry, minimum 3 people.
Minimum of 3, okay. And so we would have you, Patrick, and but I would like to have maybe 2 community. So maybe I'm thinking maybe you, Patrick, Kate, and an additional community person. Does that sound reasonable?
That's fine with me.
Okay, and again, Patrick isn't here, but I think he'd be willing to do it. If not, we can twist his arm.
No, I think he would be very much agreeable with that.
because he's the one who really wants to get it going, and I think that would it's nothing is ideal. We're not dealing in a real world, and so we're hiring somebody, and that person would continue after we have a new executive director. But I don't think we want to. I mean, we decided this is a position we needed, right away, and we really don't want to wait 18 months from now to hire a community engagement person.
Yeah, I think the other part of the reality is that Patrick would like to have that work done by someone other than himself, right, because he's taken on so much of that, and it needs to be moved on to somebody else.
Okay, so I think we have a consensus there. I would like to set up a meeting. I think Shane sent an email asking Joan whether she would like to meet, but I think we maybe ought to be a little bit more assertive and ask to meet with her so that we can explain what we're thinking in terms of the investigation procedures. Patrick was going to talk to Jason to see if he'd be willing to participate in such a meeting, and he's not here, so I'll have to check with him about that. Maybe we want Chris to attend as well. So well, I'm assuming that you didn't back from Joan. Is that correct, Charmaine? I think you would have told me if you had.
Yeah, I didn't hear back from her yet.
Okay.
I thought we were going to get Monica.
Well, that's a separate. That's a separate meeting. That's a separate meeting. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to have a meeting with. Yeah, we're going to have a meeting with Monica Montgomery Stepp, and some of the topics for that meeting was going to be the implementation ordinance. We decided to wait until we get a draft so we can have something to discuss with her, and especially if there's something that is in the draft that is contrary to what we have been advocating for, and then also to discuss some of the issues and concerns she has regarding hard hiring and so forth. And I don't have the notes in front of me, but we talked about who was going to be in that meeting. I remember Kate wanted to be in the meeting, and I think Patrick wanted to be in the meeting, and I think it was going to be it, and me, Maine, and Brandon. And so, which is why I have here on the agenda, the next item is the meeting with her. But we won't know yet when we're going to get the implementation ordinance, so we can't proceed with that meeting. But that's the plan, is that we get something from her. We want to schedule a meeting to discuss it, and especially, we think it's especially important if there are things in there that we have concerns about, so that we can discuss it with her prior to it going before the PSNLN, because we would like to resolve any differences that we have, if we can, outside of the outside the hearing. And the community update forum is kind of the same thing. Patrick, we talked about this as we were waiting to start the meeting. He wants to wait until we have a draft implementation ordinance so that he can present that to the community as well. So a new business, we don't have any items of business. Then on the second page of the agenda is some items that we have set aside for future agendas. One is complaint processing and information sharing. Second is the memorandum of understanding with SDPD, whistleblowing, quality assurance procedures for making recommendations to SDPD and required SDPD response. I would suggest we put that one on there because I would like to have in ordinance that the police chief is required to respond to the commission, in writing within a certain number of days. And so I would maybe put that as something for discussion next week. And then two items that we need to discuss soon. One is the complaint processing. We probably got to wait until we have a complaints coordinator before we do that. Then we actually can invite that person to our meeting. But right now we still have not implemented that part of Measure B, which doesn't require an ordinance. It says that we are to receive all complaints, and currently we are still under the old system of we get completed investigations, and we receive our own complaints, but we don't get the complaints from IA. And we put that on the agenda for our next meeting with the police chief. But we need to, as soon as we have a complaints coordinator, we need to establish a process for us to start getting complaints within a certain number of days. Personally, I think that we should, well, by we, I mean the executive director and the complaints coordinator should have access to the IA Pro database so that they could, we would have access to it immediately. Then it wouldn't require any transfer. We could just look and see what complaints came in. Because currently, we're not a shared database, and so all of our complaints are sent to PD, and PD has to enter it into the system. It would make a whole lot more sense that there was one system rather than have that. And so, Kate, do you go hand raised?
Of course, I have a question about this. I mean, you were chartered in mid-December, and this is mandated in the charter, and you're still not getting complaints that go directly to the police department for review. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is correct.
And when is your meeting set with NISLITE or with whoever you're going to talk about getting this started?
Charmaine, did Brandon hear back from?
Not yet.
Okay. And but part of it was it's going to be hard to push the issue until we had staff that could actually deal with it. And so we're going to have, within the next couple of weeks, hopefully, a person who's going to be responsible for handling all of the complaint processing. And so we should begin pushing that issue. So we can put that on the agenda for next week.
If you don't even have a meeting set yet, that NISLITE could just kind of put this off until you finally get a meeting with him, and then there's procedures. And I'm not going to send an email blast out to the community and tell them about this, but this is a problem that I'm hearing.
I agree. So it sounds like Kate wants us to put this as an action item for next week's agenda. Is that correct, Kate?
She's so subtle.
Okay. Well, how about if we put items A and E for next week? The one is the complaint processing, and the second one is the procedure for making recommendations to the department. And really, what I mean by that is is the PD response. And so we need to have in the ordinance that maybe, and this is both with regard to all of our recommendations regarding findings, regarding discipline, as well as policies, that we ought to require a response by the department within a certain number of days and have it be in writing and so forth. And I don't, on the top of my head, know what those timeframes should be, but I think if it's written into the ordinance, it'll give us much more power. Otherwise, we just make a recommendation and they can say, thank you for your recommendation. Okay, and then the other item that we have on the agenda here are the whistleblower and quality assurance programs, which are not as time sensitive. And then the other item, which also is in Measure BK, which we haven't started yet, is that we are, but I think this is going to require or may require procedures that may be subject to meet and confer. But because it does, because it relates to misconduct, and the POA wants to have a definition of misconduct in the implementation ordinance. But the issue is that the new commission will have the ability to review all investigations conducted by the department, not just the ones that emanate from a complaint, but the ones that emanate internally. And we're not doing that yet, but that is because we don't have procedures for doing that. And we need to start discussing what those procedures should look like. But not next week. Next week, I think we'll have plenty to talk about if we have the complaint processing. And I don't know, would it be appropriate to invite internal affairs to a meeting to discuss that? Or is that putting the cart before the horse? I don't know. Thoughts? Everybody is silent.
I would like to speak up on that. I think that's a little bit premature. I'm not real sure that we would need to do that. But I would like to make a comment. Is that I am really frustrated. This is all of this is taking so long, and I think the community. I share what Kate is saying with the community. I think it is what it is, but it's. I just want to share this. This is so frustrating because it's taking so long. The community has high expectations when they voted this in, and it seems like it just goes on and on and on and on. And I think we're doing the best that we can to try to move this, but there are so many moving parts to this that there's got to be a way for us to try to speed up the process, or at least put the priorities on the things that we need to do, especially with the concerns of the community. As far as Patrick, he's doing an excellent job. I can't believe if we didn't have him. But the community needs to know that that we are also frustrated, so that we want to get started. And it seems like it's just one meeting after another, one block after another, and so on.
And adding to the frustration was we had a proposal initially which would have streamlined the process by allowing the implementation ordinance to be done in two parts. The first part not requiring a meeting for, which would allow them to select the new commissioners who could then select the executive director. And District 4 decided to go a different direction on that. And we can debate whether that was a good idea or not, but that's the ship that's already sailed some time ago. Yeah, so I think we're all on the same page with feeling frustration, but I think we also are working as diligently as we can. So maybe we can come up with some specific request for the cabinet to share with the chief when we meet. And so if we talk about the complaint processing and what we require, and then and Charmaine can fill us in a little bit about exactly what the procedures are, administratively for handling the complaints from the beginning to the end. There's a lot more in it than I think people realize, and she's been doing it all on her own for the past year without any help. But it's a tedious a tedious process, and it's going to become more tedious once we start getting all the reports and have to do that from the beginning. But I agree with Kate that we need to do it as soon as we can. So I'm hearing that we should not invite somebody from the department to engage in this discussion. It should be just the committee. And so, unless there's an objection, our 2 items for discussion next week will be the complaint processing and the procedure for making recommendations and the expectation of what should be what the PD's response should be in terms of how they respond and when they respond. Okay. The next item of business, according to my list here, is adjournment. Do we want to do that? Or do you want to begin enjoying our overcast weekend? Although I think the sun may be coming out on Sunday. And so,
good meeting, Doug.
Okay.
Thanks, Doug.
And I would really like to welcome Joe back.
Thank you.
We missed you.
And
thank you.
And I hope you're all okay.
Yeah.
Do we need
feeling better?
Do we need Chris here next week for these 2 items?
My feelings won't be hurt.
We'll miss you.
Let me know.
I think it's important to have Chris here.
I do too.
Because she really has her hand on the pulse rate.
Okay.
Because we have a lot of questions that what we can do and what we can't do.
Okay. I know we're running up against the our billing total, although with hopefully on July 1 we'll have additional money to begin doing that. Okay, so if it's okay with you, Chris, then we'll have you come. I mean our goal, and as part of the reason why we put the $180,000 into the budget, is we want to have legal counsel at all of our commission meetings and all of our closed down, open, as well as our committee meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, I think you're going to need that, because you really, if you had independence with training wheels as the CRB, I think you're definitely going to be very much more independent moving forward. So,
and after we have our meeting with Joan, we're going to have some marching orders in terms of investigation procedures, and we're going to need legal assistance on that for sure.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Okay.
Okay, and we're back to noon, right?
Yes, we're back to noon. Next week is Memorial Day weekend, but I'm assuming everybody here is still going to be here on Friday. Does anybody planning on having weekend plans that begin before noon on Friday?
No.
Okay, I don't. So then, yes, we will meet next week back at noon, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Okay, bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a good weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Chris, for all that wonderful information.